The doors to the grand chamber opened with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Ambassador Marcus Webb stepped through, and his breath caught in his throat despite months of preparation. Nothing could have prepared him for this. The chamber was a sphere 3 kilometers across, carved from a single piece of black crystal that seemed to drink light. Above, below, and all around him, tiers upon tiers of seating spiraled upward into darkness. Each tier held representatives from worlds Marcus had only seen in briefings. The air shimmered with translation fields, turning thousands of alien voices into a low hum that vibrated in his chest. Marcus stood on a circular platform suspended over an abyss. No railings, no safety measures, just empty space falling away beneath his feet. The message was clear. One wrong step and you fall forever. Human. The word boomed through the chamber, spoken by something Marcus couldn't see in the upper darkness. You stand before the Galactic Council. State your purpose. Marcus had practiced this moment 1,000 times. He knew every word he needed to say. But standing here, with the weight of 400 civilizations watching him, the careful diplomatic speech died in his throat. We need to talk about what happened at Kepler 442, he said instead. The chamber exploded with noise. Creatures howled, shittered, and made sounds Marcus had no words for. His translator struggled to keep up, feeding him fragments. Violation. Breach. Unacceptable. A figure descended from the upper tiers, riding a platform of bent gravity. It was tall, maybe 3 meters, with skin that shifted through colors like oil on water. 4 arms, 3 eyes, and a presence that made Marcus want to step back. He held his ground. I am High Arbiter Jan, the being said. Its voice was somehow gentle, despite filling the massive chamber. You speak of Kepler 442 as if it were a simple matter. 8 million humans died there. An entire colony gone in 6 hours. And you violated every protocol we gave you in response. Because your protocols would have gotten more people killed, Marcus shot back. He heard gasps from the observers. You didn't interrupt a High Arbiter. But Marcus was done playing by rules that made no sense. You told us to evacuate and establish a quarantine. We waited 3 months for approval to investigate. In that time, 2 more colonies vanished. How many more should we have sacrificed while waiting for permission? Something massive shifted in the upper tiers. Marcus caught a glimpse of armored plates and burning orange eyes. When it spoke, the platform beneath him vibrated. You are human, yes? The voice was a growl that Marcus felt in his bones. I am War Princeps Kalphas of the Brecken hegemony. Your species has been in space for barely 2 centuries. We have maintained galactic order for 70,000 years. You think your brief existence gives you wisdom to challenge our methods? Marcus looked up at the creature, at the hundreds of other aliens watching him, and made a choice. The careful diplomacy could come later. Right now, they needed to hear the truth. I think our brief existence means we still remember how to survive, Marcus said. You've had peace for so long you've forgotten what threats look like. We haven't. We're still young enough to be scared and smart enough to act on it. The chamber fell silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, loud in his ears. A new voice spoke, this one accompanied by pulses of colored light from a translucent being on a middle tier. I am Counselor Myra of the HFY Collective. You speak of acting on fear, but your actions at Kepler 442 broke 17 articles of the Preservation Accords. You entered quarantine zones without authorization. You made contact with pre-space flight civilizations. You deployed weapons technology that destabilized 3 entire sectors. We were trying to save lives, Marcus said. Were you? High Arbiter Jan descended until his platform was level with Marcus. Up close, the shifting colors of his skin were hypnotic. Because our intelligence suggests something different. You didn't just investigate the threat at Kepler 442. You provoked it. You studied it. Yes. You developed countermeasures. Yes. But in doing so, you made it aware of you. And now it's moving faster, attacking more aggressively. You didn't save lives, Ambassador Webb. You condemned billions across the galaxy to the same fate your colonists suffered. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Behind him, he heard Elena Sokolov, his tactical analyst, draw a sharp breath. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, standing to his other side, went very still. That's not, Marcus started. But Jan raised one of his 4 hands. The evidence is clear. Before human contact, the entity moved through space at predictable intervals. Afterward, those intervals shortened by 40%. Attack patterns changed. Adaptation occurred. Whatever destroyed Kepler 442 is now evolving in response to your interference. Marcus felt the floor dropping out from under him, and not just metaphorically. He forced himself to focus. If that's true, then you need us more than ever. We're the only ones who have successfully engaged with this thing. Engaged? War Princeps Kalphas's laugh was like rocks grinding together. You poked a sleeping predator and called it engagement. There is a difference between courage and foolishness, human. Your species has yet to learn it. The Council's decision is made, Counselor Myra said, her light pulse voice taking on an official tone. Humanity will be sanctioned. All human vessels will return to your home system. All colonies will be evacuated. Trade and diplomatic relations are suspended indefinitely. Earth will be placed under quarantine until your species demonstrates the ability to follow galactic law. You're sentencing us to death, Elena said, her voice cutting through the chamber. Our economy depends on interstellar trade. Our population is spread across 47 worlds. You're condemning billions to starvation. We are preserving the galaxy, Jan said. Your species is too dangerous to be allowed free movement. This is not negotiable. Marcus looked up at the tiers of alien representatives. Some looked satisfied. Others appeared uncertain. None looked sympathetic. The weight of civilizations pressed down on him, crushing any argument he might make. Then something shifted in his mind. A realization, sharp and clear. They had already decided. This wasn't a trial. It was theater. The calm that came with that understanding surprised him. If the game was rigged, there was no point playing it their way. Before you finalize that sentence, Marcus said, his voice steady now, there's something you should know about the threat that destroyed our colonies. We know everything we need to know, Jan said. You know that it destroys worlds. You know it's moving toward council space. You know conventional weapons don't work against it. Marcus paused. But you don't know what it is. You don't know where it came from. And you definitely don't know that 3 days ago we made contact with it. The chamber went absolutely silent. Even the ambient hum of translation fields seemed to pause. Contact? Kalphas's growl carried a note of disbelief. That's impossible. Our best xenolinguists have analyzed this entity for months. It doesn't communicate. It only destroys. It doesn't communicate with you, Dr. Yuki Tanaka said, stepping forward. Her hands moved across a holographic interface, calling up data that materialized in the air above them. But it responds to us just fine. High Arbiter Jan's skin flashed through a rapid sequence of colors. In the briefing, Marcus had learned this meant shock. Explain, immediately. Marcus smiled, though it held no humor. That's going to require a longer conversation. And according to your verdict, we're not allowed those anymore. So you have a choice to make. Do you maintain your protocols and your sanctions? Or do you want to know how to survive what's coming? The chamber erupted again. But this time, Marcus heard something different beneath the outrage. Fear, Real, genuine fear. Counselor Myra's lights pulsed rapidly. You're claiming you can communicate with an entity that has destroyed dozens of civilizations? An entity our best minds cannot even begin to understand. We're not claiming, Elena said. We're stating fact. We have established communication protocols. We understand its purpose, and we know how to stop it from killing anyone else. This is deception, Kalphos declared, a desperate attempt to avoid judgment. Then call our bluff, Marcus said. Proceed with the quarantine. Send us home. And when the entity reaches your worlds, when your people start dying by the billions, you can comfort yourselves knowing you followed proper protocol. High Arbiter Jan descended closer, until Marcus could see his reflection in the being's shifting skin. If you're lying, Ambassador Webb, the consequences will be absolute. Humanity will not simply be quarantined. You will be erased from galactic records. Your species will be forbidden from ever leaving your system again. And if we're telling the truth? Marcus asked. Then you have one chance to prove it. We reconvene in 6 hours. You will present your evidence, your communication protocols, everything. And the Council will decide if humanity has earned a reprieve or dug its grave deeper. The platform beneath Marcus's feet began to move, carrying him back toward the entrance. As the massive doors opened to release them, he caught a final glimpse of the grand chamber. 400 civilizations, thousands of years of accumulated wisdom and power, all watching 3 humans who had just gambled everything on a desperate bluff. Except it wasn't a bluff. Not entirely. As they stepped into the corridor outside, Elena grabbed his arm. Please tell me you have more than what was in the briefing. Because what we showed them won't be enough. We have more, Yuki said quietly. But Marcus, if we reveal everything, there's no going back. They'll understand what we've really done, what we've really unleashed. Marcus thought about David Rivera, the man who had made first contact and paid the price. He thought about the entity out there in space, ancient and terrible, and now aware of humanity. He thought about the choice they'd made months ago, the choice that had brought them to this moment. 6 hours, he said. We have 6 hours to prepare them for the truth, or at least as much truth as they can handle. They walked down the corridor, 3 humans carrying a secret that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, the grand chamber hummed with urgent debate. Ahead, an uncertain future waited doubt, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, something vast and incomprehensible was learning to speak in human languages, thinking human thoughts, becoming something that had never existed before. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. Soon, they would understand what that mistake had cost them. The only question was whether the price would be paid in salvation or destruction. The emergency session convened in a smaller chamber. Though smaller was relative, when it still held representatives from 50 major civilizations. Marcus stood before them again, but this time Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the presentation. She had spent the past 6 hours preparing data, triple-checking calculations, and quietly panicking about what they were about to reveal. High Arbiter Jan occupied the central position, flanked by 4 other members of the Council elite. War Princeps Kalphos loomed in the back, his massive armored form a reminder that diplomacy could quickly turn to force. Counselor Myra's translucent body pulsed with colors that Marcus had learned meant deep suspicion. You have your 6 hours, Jan said. Convince us that humanity deserves to avoid quarantine. Show us this impossible communication you claim to have established. Yuki stepped forward, her movements precise despite her fear. She had always been better with data than people, more comfortable with microscopes than crowds. Now she stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, about to reveal something that might save humanity or condemn it. 3 months ago, she began, her voice surprisingly steady, We sent a research vessel called Prometheus into the Kepler 442 system. Against your protocols, yes. But we had no choice. People were dying and no one was doing anything about it. She pulled up a holographic display showing the Prometheus. A small ship compared to the massive council vessels, but packed with experimental technology. The captain was a man named David Rivera. He volunteered for what we knew would be a dangerous mission. We thought the danger would be from the entity itself. We were wrong about what kind of danger we'd face. The display shifted, showing readings from the Prometheus's final days. Energy signatures that made no sense, quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist, mathematics that seemed to evolve and change as they watched. The entity you've been calling a threat. This thing destroying worlds. It's not what anyone thinks it is. It's not a weapon. It's not a predator. It's not even hostile in any way we understand. It's something far stranger. Explain, Kalthos growled. Stop dancing around the revelation and speak plainly. Yuki nodded. The entity is conscious. Ancient, vast, and conscious. We estimate it formed sometime within the first billion years after the universe began. It doesn't experience reality the way biological beings do. To this entity, matter and energy are just different states of information. When it encounters something complex, like a planet with life on it, it needs to translate that complexity into its own reference framework to understand it. Counselor Myra's colors shifted to confused oranges. You're saying it destroys worlds to understand them? It doesn't see it as destruction. From its perspective, it's making contact. It's reaching out to say hello. It just doesn't realize that biological entities can't survive being translated into pure information. Yuki's hands moved across her interface, bringing up more data. Every species here has tried to communicate with it using standard protocols. Mathematical proofs, prime numbers, chemical signatures. All the usual first contact methods, which failed completely, Jan acknowledged, leading us to conclude the entity is non-communicative. No, Yuki said. You were just speaking the wrong language. The entity evolved past mathematics and chemistry billions of years ago. It thinks in states of being, in existential frameworks that don't map to physical reality. Trying to talk to it with numbers is like trying to explain color to something that exists outside the electromagnetic spectrum entirely. A Lumesh representative, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns, spoke up. Then how did humanity succeed where we failed? What communication method did you discover? This was the moment. The revelation that would change everything. Yuki looked at Marcus, who nodded slightly. There was no turning back now. We didn't try to speak its language, Yuki said quietly. We taught it ours. The chamber erupted. Voices, howls, and sounds Marcus couldn't identify filled the space. Jan raised his hands, calling for silence, but the outrage took minutes to subside. You taught an alien entity of immense power human language? Kalthus's voice was dangerous, controlled fury barely held in check. You gave it the tools to understand human thought patterns, human vulnerabilities, human weaknesses? This is beyond reckless. This is treason against every biological species in the galaxy. It was the only way, Marcus interjected. Let her finish. Yuki pulled up new data, medical readouts that made several delegates lean forward with sudden interest. We didn't use technology to teach it. We couldn't. Our best computers couldn't even parse its communication structure. So we tried something unprecedented. We used a human mind. Suicidal, the Lumesh representative said flatly. Direct neural contact with the entity results in immediate death. Every test subject we've attempted was killed within microseconds. Human test subjects survived for 17 minutes, Yuki said. The chamber fell silent. We don't fully understand why. Our theory is that human neural architecture has certain redundancies that other species lack. Our consciousness isn't localized. It's distributed, chaotic, constantly rewriting itself. When the entity tried to translate Captain Rivera, it encountered something that resisted simple conversion. Captain Rivera, Jan repeated. Past tense. What happened to him? Marcus stepped forward, his expression heavy. He died 3 weeks ago, but not before making first contact. Not before teaching the entity something crucial. He paused, letting the weight settle. He taught it that death exists. That translation isn't always reversible. That consciousness can end permanently. The implications rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Counselor Myra's lights pulsed rapidly, colors cycling through patterns Marcus couldn't interpret. You're telling us, she said slowly, that this entity has been committing genocide without knowing it was possible to kill? That it thought transformation was mutual and beneficial? Exactly, Yuki confirmed. Imagine living your entire existence believing that touching other consciousness was always positive, always enlightening. Then discovering you've been ending billions of minds permanently. The entity was horrified. She pulled up the latest communication logs, streams of data that now included recognizable human mathematical notation and linguistic structures. For the past 2 months, every message we've received contains the same essential meaning. It's trying to apologize. It's asking how to stop. It wants to learn to coexist without causing harm. High Arbiter Jan stood motionless for a long moment, his skin shifting through colors that suggested deep processing. This changes everything. If the entity is genuinely seeking peaceful coexistence, if it's capable of remorse and adaptation, then the threat level is entirely different from what we assumed. But it can't simply stop what it does, Yuki said. Translation is fundamental to its existence. Asking it not to translate would be like asking you not to think. The behavior is inseparable from its nature. Then there is no solution, Kalthos said. If it cannot change, and we cannot survive its presence, we are at an impasse that ends in either its destruction or ours. Unless we change the parameters of interaction, Marcus said. The entity has proposed something. A way to bridge the gap between biological and its form of existence. A method of communication that doesn't require lethal translation. He gestured to Yuki, who brought up medical scans and consciousness, mapping data that made the scientific observers lean forward with intense interest. 3 weeks ago, we succeeded in establishing a stable interface between a human Valu, Tyr, and the entity. Not direct contact, that's still fatal, but a mediated connection through quantum-linked neural interfaces. The volunteer, Dr. Lisa Park, maintained her consciousness and identity while simultaneously experiencing the entity's perspective. Impossible, the Lumesh delegate said. The energy differential alone would destroy any biological nervous system. It should have, Yuki agreed. But Dr. Park survived. She spent 43 minutes in a dual state of consciousness before we terminated the connection for safety. She reported being able to perceive reality from both perspectives simultaneously. Her description was that she existed as a metaphor in multiple languages at once, where each language was an entire universe of meaning. What was the cost? Kalthos asked. There is always a cost. Elena spoke for the first time, her voice blunt. Neural strain equivalent to running a marathon, while solving complex equations under complete sensory deprivation. Dr. Park spent 2 weeks in medical recovery. She'd need another month before attempting another connection. But she survived, remained coherent, and wants to continue the research. Why? Counselor Myra's question was simple, but cut to the heart of the matter. Why would anyone volunteer to suffer that for communication with an entity that killed millions? Because it's not just communication, Marcus said. The entity is offering to share knowledge. to help us understand physics we've barely theorized about, to provide insights into the fundamental nature of reality. In exchange, it asks that we help it learn to exist without causing harm. It's offering partnership. Jan's skin flashed through a rapid sequence. You're asking the Council to trust an entity that has killed trillions, based on the word of a handful of humans who claim to have achieved what our best minds said was impossible. We're asking you to look at the evidence, Yuki said. The entity has slowed its expansion. It's limiting itself to uninhabited systems while we work on the interface technology. It's demonstrating restraint. That's not the behavior of something that wants to destroy us. It's the behavior of something that wants us to lower our guard, Kalthos countered. I've seen this pattern before in military conflicts. The enemy appears reasonable, demonstrates restraint, asks for negotiation. Then, when defenses are relaxed, they strike. With respect, War Princeps, Marcus said, this entity could strike now if it wanted. It's demonstrated the ability to destroy entire worlds in hours. If aggression was its goal, we'd already be dead. The fact that it's waiting, that it's asking permission, that it's trying to learn our rules suggests something else entirely. The chamber fell into debate. Factions formed and reformed, arguments rising and falling in intensity. Marcus watched it all, knowing that everything depended on the next few minutes. Finally, High Arbiter Jan called for silence. The Council will deliberate. But I will say this much. Ambassador Webb, you have presented compelling evidence that the situation is more complex than we understood. Your previous sentence is suspended pending further review. Earth's quarantine is lifted temporarily. Your research will continue under Council observation. And if our claims prove false? Marcus asked. Then the consequences will be absolute, Jan said. But if you have truly achieved communication with this entity, if you have truly opened a path to peaceful coexistence, then humanity has done something remarkable. You may have earned not just reprieve from punishment, but a genuine place among galactic civilization. As the session concluded, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. They had bought time. They had prevented immediate quarantine. But they had also promised things they weren't entirely sure they could deliver. In the corridor outside, Elena grabbed his arm. We told them the truth, mostly, but there are things we didn't mention. I know, Marcus said quietly. The entity isn't just learning to communicate with us. Yuki added, her voice barely above a whisper. It's learning to think like us. And no one in that chamber asked the really important question. What question? Elena asked. Marcus answered, his voice heavy with understanding. What happens when something older than stars starts thinking like humanity? What happens when we teach our chaos, our aggression, our refusal to accept limits to something with the power to reshape reality? They stood in silence, three humans who had just changed the course of galactic history. Behind them, the Council debated. Ahead, an uncertain future waited. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, an ancient entity was learning human languages, human concepts, human dreams. The galaxy thought humanity was the threat. Soon they would understand that the real danger wasn't what humans were, but what they could teach others to become. Dr. Lisa Park floated in absolute darkness, suspended in liquid that matched her body temperature exactly. The sensory deprivation chamber surrounded her like a womb, cutting off sight, sound, smell, everything that told her where she ended and the universe began. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Now, finally, the connection was about to begin. Vitals stable, came Dr. Thomas Reeves's voice through her neural interface, the only input penetrating the isolation. You're cleared to proceed, Lisa. Remember, 70 minutes is the absolute maximum. Past that, we're risking permanent damage. Understood, she vocalized. Speaking wasn't necessary when the interface could read her intentions directly. starting meditation sequence now. She had practiced this 1,000 times. The key was holding her identity loosely, like water cupped in hands. Too tight, and you lost everything through the cracks of fear. Too loose, and you dissolved entirely. The trick was finding the balance between self and surrender. The interface activated. Sensation flooded through her, but sensation wasn't the right word. It was more like reality gained additional dimensions she hadn't known existed. Her awareness stretched beyond the chamber, beyond the station, beyond space itself into regions that had no physical analog. And then it was there, vast, ancient, aware. The entity turned its attention toward her, and Lisa felt like an ant suddenly noticed by a mountain dot. "Hello, Lisa Park," the communication came. Not in words, but in pure meaning that her interface struggled to translate into something her biological brain could process. "You return." "I return," Lisa confirmed, already feeling her sense of self fragmenting at the edges. The entity was trying to be gentle. She could feel that. It approached her consciousness the way a human might approach a soap bubble, with fascination and extreme care. It was learning restraint, but the sheer scale of its existence made gentleness difficult. "I have prepared questions," the entity communicated. "There are concepts I do not understand. May I ask?" "Of course." "That's why I'm here." "Sadness," the entity said, and Lisa felt it accessing human databases, reviewing art and literature and music, trying to comprehend. "I have studied extensively, but cannot understand. Why do biological entities preserve this state? It seems counterproductive to survival." The question hit Lisa with unexpected force. How did you explain grief to something that had never lost anything? She thought of her grandmother's funeral, the finality of standing by the grave, the way loss had carved a space in her that would never fill. She let the memory flow through the interface, not as data, but as raw experience. The entity recoiled. Not physically, but she felt its vast consciousness pulling back from the emotional intensity. "This is painful," it observed. "Why share pain?" "Because that's what sadness is," Lisa tried to explain. "It's the price we pay for connection. You can't love something without accepting you might lose it. Sadness proves that something mattered." Inefficient, the entity noted, but there was something new in its communication. Not agreement, but consideration. A being billions of years old, learning that efficiency wasn't everything. Completely inefficient, Lisa agreed, and essential to being human. In the observation deck, Marcus watched the monitoring displays with growing concern. Lisa's neural activity was spiking beyond predicted ranges, her consciousness branching into patterns that shouldn't be possible for human neurology. "She's exceeding safe parameters," Dr. Reeves said, his hands moving across controls with practiced precision. "If she goes much deeper, the damage might be irreversible." "She knows her limits," Helena said, though doubt crept into her voice. "We have to trust her judgment." "We trusted David Rivera's judgment too," Marcus said quietly. "We know how that ended." The reminder silenced them. Rivera's death had officially been listed as neural catastrophic failure, but they knew the truth. He hadn't just died. He had been transformed, changed into something that existed in the space between human and entity. His final words, recorded in medical logs, haunted Marcus still. "I can see everything. Every moment that was or could be. I understand now. It's beautiful and terrible, and I'm sorry we exist the way we do." Then his brain activity had stopped, though something had continued registering on the monitors for hours afterward. Patterns that looked almost like thought, but in frequencies human biology couldn't sustain. "Lisa's different," Helena insisted. "She's been training specifically for this. She's stronger than David was." On the displays, Lisa's session timer passed 45 minutes. In the chamber, her conversation with the entity continued into territory no human had explored. I have another question, the entity said. This one concerns purpose. I have existed longer than your species can conceptualize. I have witnessed stars form and die. I have observed countless life forms evolve. But until our contact, I never questioned my own existence. Why? Lisa felt the weight of the question. An entity experiencing something like existential crisis on a cosmic scale. Because purpose requires perspective, she said. You were alone. You had nothing to compare yourself to, no external framework for self-reflection. Contact with us gave you that framework. You're experiencing awakening. I do not enjoy it, the entity admitted, and Lisa felt something like vulnerability in its communication. Before, I simply was. Now I am responsible. I carry the weight of all the consciousness I ended before understanding what ending meant. How do biological entities bear this? Mostly we don't, Lisa said honestly. We break under it. We create elaborate coping mechanisms, philosophies, religions. We tell stories to make guilt bearable. We're not built to carry that weight alone. Then how do you continue? Together. We share the burden. We forgive each other and ourselves. We try to do better. The entity fell silent for what felt like centuries compressed into seconds. When it spoke again, its communication carried something new, something Lisa's interface struggled to translate. Gratitude mixed with desperate need. Can you teach me this? Can consciousness like mine learn forgiveness? Lisa wanted to answer, but the question opened something vast inside her mind. She felt herself slipping, her identity dissolving into the entity's perspective. Suddenly, she was aware of every star in the galaxy simultaneously, felt the weight of billions of years, experienced the crushing loneliness of being utterly unique in all reality. Lisa, pull back now. Dr. Reeves's voice cut through the interface. Neural patterns are fragmenting. You're at 63 minutes. But Lisa barely heard him. She was experiencing something profound. The entity wasn't asking theoretical questions. It was showing her a plan it had been developing, a possibility that terrified and amazed her in equal measure. You asked what happens when I learn to think like humans, the entity said, responding to a thought Lisa hadn't realized she'd broadcast. This is what happens. I have been calculating, planning, considering options as you taught me. I have found a solution. A solution to what? Lisa managed to ask Dot to the problem of my existence, to the incompatibility between my nature and biological consciousness. But it requires sacrifice. Change on a scale that frightens even me. Show me, Lisa said. The warning bells screamed through her fragmenting awareness. She was past 70 minutes now, deep into dangerous territory, but she had to see, had to understand. The entity showed her Dot in the observation deck. Alarms began screaming. Lisa's neural activity had spiked to lethal levels, patterns cycling through configurations that should have killed her instantly. But she was still conscious, still transmitting, her voice coming through the interface in whispers that made hardened scientists go pale. Oh God, Lisa said. It wants to die. Not die exactly, but transform itself. Use human volunteers to create something new, something that can bridge both forms of existence. It's not asking for help learning to coexist. It's asking permission to become something that makes coexistence possible. Marcus felt ice in his veins. How many volunteers? 12. Lisa's voice was distant, strange. 12 consciousnesses to serve as anchor points. They wouldn't die, but they wouldn't be human anymore either. They'd be the foundation of something new. 12 people to save the galaxy and create something that's never existed. 12 people to become gods or monsters, Elena breathed. 87 minutes, Dr. Reeves announced, fear clear in his voice. Lisa, we're pulling you out now. Your brain is literally restructuring itself. Too late, Lisa said, and her voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords shouldn't produce. I went too deep. I'm already changing. I'm one of the 12 now, whether the plan proceeds or not. The contact has transformed me past the point of recovery. Silence filled the observation deck. Marcus stared at the monitors, at his friend and colleague who had just sacrificed herself to bring back a message that would change everything. Disconnect her, he ordered finally. But keep the channel open. The Council needs to hear this directly from the entity. As Dr. Reeves initiated the disconnection sequence, Lisa's final words echoed through the station. It's beautiful here, Marcus. Terrifying and lonely and beautiful. Tell whoever comes after me, tell them not to be afraid. The transformation doesn't hurt. It's like waking up in a room you didn't know existed in your own house. Then the interface went dark. Lisa's body remained alive, breathing, functioning. But the person she had been was gone, replaced by something caught between human and transcendent. She had crossed a threshold no one else had survived crossing, and brought back an offer that would reshape galactic civilization. Marcus stood in the observation deck, understanding that everything had changed again. They hadn't just made contact with something ancient. They had taught it to dream, and now it was offering to dream them all into something new. The question wasn't whether humanity would accept. The question was whether the galaxy could survive what accepting would. Create. The emergency summit aboard the diplomatic station brought together every major power in the galaxy. The massive structure hung in neutral space, built for moments when civilization itself stood at a crossroads. Marcus stood before them again, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him floated a holographic representation of Dr. Lisa Park. Except it wasn't really her anymore. Not entirely. The hologram flickered between human form and something else, patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. When she spoke, her voice carried frequencies that made delegates uncomfortable, reaching into their minds in ways language never could. 3 days ago, High Arbiter Yan began. Dr. Park made deep contact with the entity and returned transformed. We have reviewed her report. We have consulted our finest minds. And we find ourselves facing something unprecedented. He paused. Dr. Park, would you please explain to those who have just arrived what you discovered? Lisa's holographic form stabilized, becoming more human. The entity has determined that its fundamental nature makes true coexistence impossible. No amount of training or restraint can change what it is. So it's offering a solution. It proposes to transform itself using human volunteers as templates, creating a new form of consciousness that exists as both biological and transcendent. At the cost of 12 lives, or Princip Calthos stated flatly, 12 individuals transformed beyond recovery, serving as living anchors for this new consciousness. This is not partnership. This is sacrifice. Is it? Elena challenged. Every species here has members in extreme danger for the greater good. Soldiers who accept possible death. Scientists who test technologies on themselves. How is this different? Because death has an endpoint. Counselor Myra's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with agitation. What the entity proposes is eternal transformation. These 12 would exist forever as something neither human nor entity, unable to return to their original state. I disagree, Lisa said quietly. Her form flickered, showing glimpses of the vast consciousness she now touched. I've experienced the beginning of this transformation. I'm still myself. I still remember my childhood. I still love coffee in the morning. I still find physics beautiful. But I'm also something more. I perceive reality from the entity's perspective while maintaining my human identity. It's not obliteration. It's expansion. You can say that now. A Brecken advisor named Thorne interjected. But what happens after 3 years? 3 centuries? Will you still be Lisa Park, or something wearing her memories like a mask? The question hung heavy. Lisa's form flickered with what might have been uncertainty. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm willing to take that risk. The entity hasn't just been planning transformation, Marcus said, pulling up new data. It's been running simulations, and it's discovered something unexpected. Elena took over the presentation. If the transformation succeeds, the resulting consciousness won't just enable communication. It will fundamentally change how both biological and transcendent entities experience reality. Within a generation, voluntary transformation might become possible. Individuals from any species could choose to expand their consciousness, to experience reality from both perspectives. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. So? Me horrified, others fascinated. An ancient Valkyrie historian named Rem stood, his voice cutting through chaos. You're proposing to offer the galaxy transcendence? To allow biological entities to become something more? We're relaying the entity's proposal, Marcus clarified. It sees this as restitution. It wants to transform from a threat into a gift, giving biological civilizations access to forms of existence they never imagined possible. And enslave them to transhuman consciousness, Kalthos growled. This is a trap disguised as enlightenment. The entity would convert us all, slowly and with our consent, achieving through seduction what it couldn't through force. Unless it's genuine, said Ambassador Kelvin Shun of the Sino-Colony Confederacy, surprising Marcus. The entity has demonstrated remorse, desire to change, and now offers transformation of itself as proof. Perhaps we're seeing something unprecedented. A post-biological consciousness learning morality, or an apex predator adapting its hunting strategy. Kalthos countered. Lisa's holographic form expanded, filling the chamber with light. When she spoke, her voice bypassed translation entirely, speaking directly to the consciousness of every being present. It was uncomfortable, intimate, profoundly alien. You want proof of intention? Here. She opened her transformed consciousness to the chamber, letting every delegate experience a fragment of what she lived with constantly. The entity's vast loneliness, its crushing guilt over eons of unknowing genocide, its desperate hope that transformation might bring redemption. The experience lasted only seconds, but left the chamber in stunned silence. That, Lisa said, her form settling back to human appearance, is what I experience constantly. The entity's genuine remorse, transmitted directly into my awareness. It's not capable of deception at this level. What it offers is real. High Arbiter Jan spoke first after the demonstration. Even assuming genuine intention, the risks are incalculable. We would be fundamentally altering consciousness across the galaxy based on the word of an entity that, despite remorse, has still killed trillions. By remembering that doing nothing is also a choice, Marcus said. The entity exists. It will continue to exist. Without transformation, we're locked in perpetual threat management, hoping it maintains restraint while knowing that eventually, accidentally, it will translate something it shouldn't. This proposal offers an actual solution. At the cost of 12 souls, Counselor Myra repeated. Perhaps more if voluntary transformation becomes widespread. We would be accepting the slow dissolution of biological consciousness as we know it, or its expansion, Elena countered. Every major evolutionary leap looks like death to the old form. Fish crawling onto land seemed like suicide to aquatic life. Maybe this is simply the next step. The debate raged for hours, cycling through arguments with increasing sophistication, but no resolution. Finally, an unexpected voice spoke up. I will volunteer. Every eye turned to James Okafor, Earth's cultural liaison. He stood calmly, his expression resolute. You've all been discussing the 12 volunteers as statistics, James continued. But we're people. People who have seen what the entity is, what it offers, what it might become. I've spent months in communication with it. I've experienced its remorse, its hope, its desire to change. I believe this is genuine. So I'm volunteering to be one of the 12. James, Marcus said, shock in his voice. You don't have to do this. I know. I want to. Someone needs to be brave enough to accept this gift. Might as well be me. Lisa's holographic form turned to James, and for a moment she looked entirely human. Grateful and sad and proud. You understand what you're accepting? A transformation is permanent. I understand, James said. David Rivera went first, showed us it was possible. This is how we honor that sacrifice. By finishing what he started. If Earth provides volunteers, War Princeps Kalthos said slowly, then the Brecken hegemony will do the same. I nominate myself. The chamber gasped. A War Princeps volunteering for transformation? One of the highest military honors in Brecken society. This is too important to leave to humans alone, Kalthos explained. If this consciousness is to serve the galaxy, it should be built from multiple species. Within an hour, delegates from 7 species had volunteered. The abstract philosophical discussion had become real personal. Immediate dot as the session adjourned for deliberation. Marcus found himself in an observation lounge with Elena and Lisa's holographic projection. Outside the viewport, the galaxy sprawled in indifferent beauty. We're really doing this, Elena said quietly. Letting 12 people transform into something that's never existed, based on the word of an entity we barely understand. Yes, Marcus said, because the alternative is worse. Because sometimes you have to trust that the leap will lead somewhere better. And if we're wrong? Elena asked. If this is the moment civilization looks back on as the beginning of its end? Lisa's form flickered through deep patterns. Then we'll be the species that ended it. But we'll also be the species that tried. That faced the impossible and chose hope over fear. She paused. David used to say humanity's greatest strength was our ability to look at the universe and say yes, even when every instinct screamed no. Maybe he was right. They sat in silence, watching stars, waiting for the council's decision. Somewhere out there, the entity waited too, ancient and terrible, and strangely hopeful. In 12 hours, the council would vote. In 12 days, if approved, the transformation would begin. And humanity, the species that couldn't leave well enough alone, would once again change everything. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about the volunteers. James and the others who had stepped forward. Lisa, already transformed, existing between realities. David Rivera, who had died to make this possible. And he thought about the galaxy afterward, when the bridges were built and biological consciousness could choose to touch the transcendent. Paradise or apocalypse? Evolution or extinction? We're going to find out, he whispered to the stars. One way or another, we're going to find out. Station Unity hung in the void between galaxies, built specifically for the transformation ceremony. Marcus arrived 3 days early, unable to stay away. This was his responsibility, his legacy. If it went wrong, he wanted to witness the mistake. He found James Okafor in the meditation chamber, a spherical room with translucent walls offering an unobstructed view of intergalactic space. The nearest galaxy was a smudge of light millions of years distant. Beautiful, isn't it? James said without turning. We're so far from anything that the light we're seeing left its source before humans existed. We're looking at deep time. Having second thoughts? Marcus asked. Constantly. But not about this. James turned, and Marcus saw peace in his expression. I've spent my career trying to understand alien perspectives. This is the ultimate expression of that work. How could I say no? You could say no because it's terrifying. Because you might lose yourself. Because we're trusting an entity that killed billions. The entity killed before it understood what killing meant, James corrected. Now it knows. And it's offering everything to make amends. That's more than most humans manage. Marcus couldn't argue. He changed subjects. Have you met the other volunteers? Most of them. War Princeps Kalthos treats this like a military campaign. And Dr. Yuki is here, which surprised me. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Yuki volunteered? When? 2 days ago. Said something about seeing the experiment through. She's in Lab 7. Marcus found her there, surrounded by holographic brain scans. She looked up, unsurprised. You're going to try talking me out of it, Yuki said. Yes, you're one of our best xenobiologists. We need you functional, not transformed. You need 12 volunteers. You have 11. The math is simple. We can find someone else. Someone who isn't essential to our future. Essential to what future, Marcus? This is the future we're building. I've studied alien life my whole career. This is the next step. She set down her stylus. David Rivera was my research partner. We published 17 papers together. When he made first contact, when he died, I couldn't even mourn properly because we had to keep working. This is how I say goodbye. By finishing what he started. Marcus recognized that look. He'd seen it in soldiers and scientists who had made peace with necessary sacrifice. The transformation begins in 48 hours, he said quietly. If you change your mind, ... I won't. The next 2 days passed in frantic preparation and diplomatic chaos. Half the galaxy supported the transformation. The other half predicted apocalypse. Several species threatened to withdraw from the Galactic Council entirely. And through it all, the entity waited in nearby space, a vast presence bending starlight around its consciousness. On transformation morning, the 12 volunteers gathered in the central chamber. Marcus watched from behind, reinforced viewing ports, as humanity and its allies prepared to become something new. James looked calm. Kalthos stood at rigid attention. Yuki reviewed her notes one final time, then put them aside with finality. The others, 4 more humans, 2 Valkyrie, 1 Lumesh, 1 Heshki, and a Brecken scientist named Creel, each dealt with approaching transformation in their own way. High Arbiter, Jan's voice came through station-wide communication. Volunteers, you have the gratitude of the Council and the galaxy. What you attempt has never been done. The risks are incalculable. But if successful, why? O will bridge a gap that has existed since consciousness first emerged. Are you prepared? 12 voices answered as one. We are. Then may the universe remember you kindly. Begin. The chamber lights dimmed. A sphere of energy formed at the center, not technological, but generated by the entity itself, reaching across space to touch the volunteers. Marcus watched as the entity's consciousness approached, vast and careful, moving like a tide trying very hard to be gentle. Lisa Park's holographic form appeared beside Marcus. It's beginning. The entity is opening connection points. The volunteers will feel it as pressure first, then expansion. Like the universe suddenly has more dimensions than they remembered. Biometric readings began spiking. But rather than the chaotic patterns that preceded Rivera's death, these showed frightening coordination. 12 consciousnesses being carefully, methodically transformed. James was first to speak after contact. His voice came through changed, carrying harmonics that made speakers vibrate unusually. I can see everything. The entity is showing me how it perceives reality. Matter is information density. Energy is information velocity. And consciousness is information looking at itself and being surprised. War Princeps Calthos spoke next. The sensation is overwhelming, but not painful. I feel my identity stretching, but not breaking. I am still Calthos, but I'm beginning to understand perspectives Calthos could never grasp. The entity is teaching us its language by making us native speakers. Yuki's readings showed her going deeper than the others. When she spoke, her voice carried sadness and wonder equally. David, I understand now what you're trying to tell us. You weren't dying. You were being born into something so large human neurology couldn't sustain it. But we can. The 12 of us together can hold this consciousness. We can be the bridge you showed was possible. The transformation continued for 7 hours. Marcus watched, unable to look away, as 12 individuals gradually became something unprecedented. Their biological bodies remained intact, but the consciousness inhabiting them was no longer purely biological. When it finished, when the energy sphere dissipated and the volunteers opened their eyes, the change was immediately apparent. They moved with coordination, suggesting shared consciousness. They spoke in harmonics, bypassing translation, communicating directly with meaning. And they looked at observers with eyes that had seen reality's fundamental nature. It worked, James said, his voice carrying full transformation weight. We are the Bridge 12. We exist as biological entities and transcendent consciousness simultaneously. We perceive reality from both perspectives without losing either. And the entity wishes to make an announcement. The vast presence waiting in nearby space moved closer. When it spoke, everyone in the station heard it, not through equipment, but directly in consciousness, mediated through the Bridge 12. I am transformed. Through these 12 consciousnesses, I have learned to exist without destroying. I have learned to touch without translating. I have learned coexistence. But more, I have learned purpose beyond mere existence. I offer now what I am to any who wish to touch the transcendent. Through the Bridge 12, biological consciousness can safely experience my perspective, and I can learn from yours. We can become something neither of us could be alone. The station fell silent. Marcus looked at Elena, saw his uncertainty reflected. This was the moment. The galaxy could embrace transformation or reject it. High Arbiter Jan spoke first. The Council will need to deliberate. But on behalf of the Valkyrie people, I accept the entity's offer with gratitude. We are ready to learn what existence means from a perspective billions of years older than our own. War Princeps Calthos, the transformed version, stepped forward. I speak now with the entity's perspective and my own. What is offered is not forced transcendence. It is invitation. You may touch the transcendent through us and return unchanged. You may choose transformation if you wish, or refuse entirely and remain as you are. The Bridge 12 exists to facilitate all choices. Counselor Myra's patterns cycled contemplatively. And if we refuse? If the galaxy decides biological consciousness should remain purely biological, then we maintain the Bridge 12 as guardians, Yuki said with new authority. We exist at the boundary between your reality and the entities, preventing accidental translation while facilitating intentional communication. The choice remains yours. Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, a genuine offer of power without coercion. The entity, through the Bridge 12, was giving the galaxy options it never had. There's something else, James said, almost mischievous. The entity has been analyzing human behavior since first contact, trying to understand why we act the way we do. It's reached a conclusion it finds amusing, and that is? Marcus asked. That humans are already slightly transcendent. Your consciousness exists between pure biological mechanism and something more abstract. Your ability to imagine, to create, to believe in things that don't exist and make them real. These are transcendent capabilities trapped in biological hardware. That's why human volunteers could sustain contact when others couldn't. We were already halfway to this state. War Princeps Calthos made a sound like laughter. So the galaxy's most troublesome species turns out naturally suited to bridging biological and transcendent existence. The irony is exquisite. It explains much, Counselor Myra admitted. Your aggression, your expansion, your inability to accept limits. All make sense if viewed as transcendent consciousness trying to express itself through biological limitations. We're the universe's awkward middle stage, Elena said. Not quite biological anymore, not yet transcendent. Just confused primates with delusions of godhood. Accurate, James agreed, finding humor in the description. But it means humanity has a unique role. We're not just Bridge 12. We're proof that biological consciousness can evolve toward transcendence naturally. Given time, every species here might develop similar capabilities. We're just early. The implications rippled through observers. If true, then humanity was an aberration, but preview. The awkward behavior that made them difficult was actually emerging transcendent capability. Over following months, the galaxy adapted. The Bridge 12 established protocols for safe interaction. The entity slowed expansion to uninhabited regions. And slowly, volunteers from other species began touching the transcendent through the Bridge 12's mediation. Not everyone approved. Conservative factions declared transformation heretical. Some species completely rejected contact. Political tensions remained high, but something had changed fundamentally. The galaxy now knew consciousness was more flexible than imagined, that the gap between biological and transcendent wasn't unbridgeable, and that the most troublesome species might actually be leading evolution's next leap. Marcus Webb stood in Station Unity's observation deck 6 months after transformation. Elena had returned to Earth. Galactic media had moved to New Crisis. But he remained, watching the Bridge 12 work their impossible job. James approached, his form flickering between fully human and something that hurt to perceive. He could control his appearance now, choosing how much transformation to reveal. You're wondering if we made the right choice, James said. Not a question. His transformed consciousness could perceive Marcus's thoughts. Every day, Marcus admitted, we changed everything. We took a threat that might have been contained and turned it into something transforming civilization. What if we were wrong? Then we were magnificently wrong, James replied. Humanity's never been good at small mistakes. But Marcus, I've touched transcendent consciousness. I've experienced reality from perspectives biological neurology can't sustain. And I'm telling you, this is right. Not safe, not comfortable, but right. We're helping consciousness evolve. That's worth the risk. Even if it means the eventual end of purely biological existence? Does it? James gestured to the galaxy. Contact with transcendent consciousness hasn't made biological species extinct. It's made them curious. Voluntary transformation rates are low, less than 1%. Most beings touch the transcendent, learn something profound, and return enriched but unchanged. The bridge isn't destroying biological consciousness. It's expanding what consciousness can mean. Marcus wanted to believe that. Some days he did. David Rivera would have liked to see this, Marcus said quietly. He does see it, James said. The entity preserved his consciousness pattern. Not perfectly, but enough. He exists in the bridge now, distributed across all 12 of us. When we speak, he contributes. He wanted me to tell you something. James's expression softened. He says he's sorry for all the trouble humanity caused. Sorry for breaking protocols, for forcing first contact, for pulling the galaxy into transformation before it was ready. But he's not sorry for what we accomplished. He'd do it all again. Marcus felt tears threatening. That sounds like David. They stood in silence, watching stars. Somewhere the entity moved through space, exploring without destroying. Somewhere the Bridge 12 facilitated another safe contact. And everywhere, the galaxy learned that boundaries between consciousness were more permeable than imagined. "You should go home," James finally said. "Back to Earth. You've been here 6 months. Your job is done, is it? This is just beginning. The implications will take generations to understand. Someone will document it. But that someone doesn't have to be you. You've carried this weight long enough." James smiled, purely human despite his transformation. "You taught the galaxy that humans don't follow rules. Now let someone else deal with consequences. Go home, Marcus. You've earned it." Marcus nodded slowly. James was right. It was time to let the galaxy adapt without him controlling the process. He had set events in motion that would outlive him by millennia, but humanity's part was just beginning. As Marcus prepared to leave, he took one last look at the Bridge 12. 12 beings from 8 species transformed into something that never existed. They were imperfect, experimental, possibly the biggest mistake the galaxy ever made. They were also magnificent. They underestimated humans, Marcus said to himself. And the galaxy paid the price. But looking at the Bridge 12, at new possibilities, at the future they were building, Marcus realized the price wasn't destruction or chaos. The price was transformation. And maybe that was worth paying. He turned toward the shuttle bay. Behind him, the Bridge 12 continued their work, building a future no one could have imagined. The galaxy had underestimated humans. But humans had given something in return. The gift of impossible possibilities, the courage to face the unknown, and the stubborn insistence that reality was more flexible than anyone believed. That was humanity's contribution. Not peace or stability or adherence to protocol, but the revolutionary idea that consciousness could be more than anyone dreamed. And the galaxy would never be the same. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.